So imagine you wake up and you pour yourself a cup of coffee in your massive custom-built home in Fresno.
Right. Nice and spacious in
Oh,
the valley.
yeah, exactly. You step out your door and you sit down at your desk in a downtown San Francisco skyscraper, like before that coffee even gets cold.
Which sounds completely absurd.
It sounds like pure sci-fi, right? I mean, a 150-mile commute taking, what, 20 minutes?
Barely enough time to drink the coffee, yeah.
But today, we are taking a deep dive into a comprehensive blueprint that claims this isn't just physically possible.
It's economically necessary.
Exactly. We're unpacking a really radical proposal that argues the only way to save California from its intertwined housing and traffic crises is to just effectively dissolve the concept of distance altogether.
Which fundamentally rewrites the rules of urban planning.
Yeah.
I mean, we base our entire societal structure, where we live, how much we pay for land, where we work on the fixed time it takes to travel between point A and point B.
Right. Time is the limiting factor.
Exactly. But if you shrink that time to near zero, the geography of an entire state becomes completely fluid.
So our source material for today is this sweeping, highly detailed blog post. It was published today, actually, June 17th, 2026, by a prolific author and systems thinker named Paramendra.
Very prolific.
Yeah, and the post is titled California Hyperloop Nexus, or CHN, Aetherlink Futuristic Underground Network for a Decentralized Golden State.
It's a mouthful, but it's incredibly detailed.
It really is. And our mission today is to tear into this massive document. It proposes solving California's systemic paralysis by combining an underground Hyperloop transit system with automated Tesla-style gigafactories for prefab housing.
But right off the bat, the author sets a really distinct tone. I mean, from the very first paragraph.
Oh, yeah. It's not what you'd expect.
Not at all. You might expect this dry, bureaucratic, white paper detailing, infrastructure yields and concrete tonnage.
Right, the usual boring stuff.
Exactly. Instead, the text frames this entire endeavor within an impending age of abundance. And the author actually notes that this was, quote, prophesied in the scriptures thousands of years ago.
Which is such a wild way to open a transit proposal.
It really is. It positions heavy infrastructure not just as an engineering challenge, but as this deeply philosophical, almost spiritual mandate,
Yeah.
For how human beings ought to interact with their environment.
So to our listeners, whether you live in California or you just, watch its struggles from afar, you probably know the housing and traffic problems there feel completely unsolvable.
Oh, absolutely. Gridlock everywhere.
Right. So today, we're taking you through a radical alternative. Like, how does an entire state just hit the reset button?
And that philosophical framing we mentioned really contextualizes the sheer ambition of the proposal. Because before the text can build this utopian future, it has to aggressively deconstruct the present.
Yeah, the author spends a huge portion of the opening just diagnosing California's current state of infrastructure paralysis.
And the main target of its ire is the existing California high-speed rail project.
Oh, man. Yeah, the text frames it as the ultimate cautionary tale.
Because the numbers cited in the post illustrate a severe systemic failure.
Mm-hmm.
The original estimates for the high-speed rail were roughly $33 billion.
Which was already a lot of money.
Right. But the author points out that current projections have spiraled to anywhere from $100 to $230 billion.
Wait, $230 billion? Just for phase one?
Just for partial or full phase one build-out.
Yeah.
And that massive capital expenditure is happening while delivering what the text calls minimal tangible progress.
So to understand why it's failing, we have to look at the mechanics of surface-level mega projects, which the author heavily critiques, right?
Building on the surface is a nightmare.
Because when you build on the surface, especially in a state like California, you aren't just pouring concrete. You're fighting this multi-decade war of land acquisition.
You have to carve a path through prime agricultural land in the Central Valley.
Exactly. Which means you are battling thousands of individual property owners using eminent domain. Every single farm, every single small town, it triggers a new wave of environmental reviews and, endless litigation.
And building on that, the legal and environmental friction is precisely what causes those costs to balloon from $33 billion to $230 billion.
Because time is money, right?
Exactly. Time is money in construction. When litigation stalls a project for 5 years, your material costs rise, inflation eats into the budget, and contract retainers just bleed the state dry.
Yeah, you're paying people just to sit around and wait for lawyers.
Right. So the author argues that the current high-speed rail project is fundamentally broken because its methodology, surface construction through heavily populated, privately owned land, it's just incompatible with modern legal realities.
Which brings us to the author's radical solution, and the text doesn't suggest bringing in consultants to trim the budget or, optimize the current rail project.
No, it goes nuclear.
Yeah, it proposes a piece of legislation called the California Aetherlink Mobility and Housing Act. And step one of this act is formally terminating the high-speed rail project.
Just pulling the plug entirely.
Completely.
Yeah.
And treating the billions of dollars already spent as a sunk cost.
Aesthetically and politically, that is an incredibly bitter pill to swallow.
Right.
I mean, admitting defeat on a multi-billion-dollar scale goes against every instinct of public administration.
Oh, for sure. It's the ultimate example of the sunk cost fallacy. We often think about it like an old car that keeps breaking down. But on this scale, it's more like, I don't know, spending $20 billion building a bridge across a massive bay.
Right.
And you get halfway across and you realize the engineering is flawed. It doesn't align with the opposite shore at all. But the politicians argue, well, we have to keep building. We already bought all this steel.
Even if the bridge goes nowhere.
Exactly. Logic dictates you pivot, sell it for parts, start over. But politics demands you keep building the crooked bridge.
But the text attempts to bridge that political reality by offering a pragmatic off-ramp.
Okay, how so?
Well, the proposed Aetherlink Act wouldn't simply set fire to the old project. It mandates redirecting the remaining funds, the rights of way that the state has already bled to purchase, and any usable physical assets toward this new Hyperloop initiative wherever geometrically feasible.
Oh, I see. So you salvage the foundation to build something entirely new.
Precisely. This creates a clean slate, bypassing all those entrenched bureaucratic interests and opening the door for private innovation to take the lead.
Without carrying the baggage of the past decade.
Exactly.
Okay, so that political reset opens the door for the actual hardware. Let's dive into the Aetherlink mechanics, because this is where the source material gets highly technical.
The physics here are fascinating.
Yeah, the text outlines a fully underground maglev vacuum tube network cruising at speeds of 600 to 750 miles per hour.
750. Just incredible.
Right. But before we gloss over those words, we really should unpack the physics of what the author is actually proposing here. Why a maglev vacuum tube?
Well, the engineering logic here directly addresses the limitations of traditional rail. On a normal train, even a high-speed one, you have two massive forces working against you.
Okay.
The first is mechanical friction. That's steel wheels physically grinding against steel tracks. The second, and much more significant at high speeds, is aerodynamic drag.
Because the train is hitting the air.
Right. Pushing through the atmosphere requires an exponential amount of energy the faster you go.
Yeah, the atmosphere is basically a fluid that you have to punch a hole through.
Correct. So maglev, which is short for magnetic levitation, eliminates that mechanical friction. The pods don't have wheels.
Wait, no wheels at all?
None. They use electromagnetic forces to float just above the track. And they're propelled forward by shifting magnetic fields. So the physical grinding is completely gone.
Okay, so that solves friction. What about the air?
To solve the aerodynamic drag, the author's blueprint encloses the entire system in a tube and pumps out nearly all the air.
Creating a vacuum.
A near vacuum environment.
Yeah.
Without air resistance, a pod can achieve near supersonic speeds, that 750 miles per hour mark, using a fraction of the energy a surface vehicle would require.
That is just mind-blowing. And the text is incredibly specific about the operating environment for these tubes, too. They have to be entirely underground.
Which is a crucial detail.
Yeah. We touched on how that avoids the surface-level land acquisition nightmare, out of sight and out of mind. But the author lists several physical engineering reasons for this as well, starting with seismic resilience.
Right, because California is earthquake country.
Exactly. And putting a vacuum tube underground sounds terrifying to the average person during an earthquake, like you're trapped in a tube under the earth.
It does sound counterintuitive, but underground structures are generally much safer during seismic events than surface structures.
Really? Why is that?
The text leans on modern tunnel engineering principles here. When an earthquake happens, the surface of the earth shakes violently, like a blanket being whipped.
Right.
But deep underground, a tunnel moves uniformly with the surrounding rock or soil. Engineers use flexible seismic joints in the tunnel lining. This allows the structure to absorb and move with the tectonic waves, rather than fighting them and breaking.
Oh, wow. So it's actually safer down there.
Considerably safer.
Okay, so beyond the seismic aspect, the author also points to the environmental impact, specifically noise reduction and wildlife preservation.
The noise factor is huge.
I bet. I mean, a vehicle displacing what little air is left in a tube at 750 miles per hour, that generates a massive sonic footprint. If this were above ground, you would be subjecting communities to a continuous roar.
It would be unbearable. But burying it eliminates the noise pollution completely and leaves surface habitats entirely undisturbed. The wildlife can just go about their business.
Which keeps the environmental groups happy, which avoids the lawsuits.
Exactly. The subterranean approach also allows for far more direct geometric routing. Surface rail has to curve around mountains, avoid historical sites, zigzag through property lines.
All of which force the train to slow down.
Right. But tunnel boring machines can draw straight lines beneath all of that complexity, which is mathematically essential when you're trying to maintain speeds of 700 miles per hour.
Right, you can't take a sharp turn at that speed.
Definitely not.
So that sheer speed requires a completely different logistical approach to how passengers actually board and travel. The text specifies that Aetherlink relies on AI-optimized scheduling.
No more printed timetables.
Exactly. The pods arrive on demand every 2 to 5 minutes. This isn't a train with 10 cars stopping at every station.
It resembles a massive high-speed ride-sharing algorithm much more than a traditional transit timetable.
Like Uber, but underground and super fast.
Sort of, yeah. In a standard subway, a train stops at every station, regardless of whether anyone wants to get off. The Aetherlink pods are envisioned as smaller, autonomous units. The AI fleet management system tracks passenger demand in real time.
So if I get in a pod,
If you board a pod in Los Angeles heading for San Francisco, that specific pod merges onto the main vacuum trunk line and bypasses all the intermediate stations without slowing down.
it just blows right past Fresno and Bakersfield.
Exactly. It only diverges from the main tube when it reaches its specific destination.
This completely changes the psychology of the commute. For you listening, imagine never having to check a schedule. You never worry about missing the 8.15 train. You just walk into the station, the system reads your destination, and groups you into a pod that arrives 2 minutes later.
It removes all the cognitive load of commuting.
And the text notes that these pods aren't just for human passengers either. The author includes cargo pods for same-hour deliveries.
The economic implications of cargo pods are immense.
I can imagine Amazon would love this.
Oh yeah. The text points out this would massively reduce the need for long-haul trucking on California's highways. You are shifting the most destructive, highest-emission cargo transport off the surface roads and into an automated, carbon-negative, renewable-powered underground artery.
That's huge for traffic on the I-5.
It would fundamentally alter the state's logistics network.
And the speed and the automation effectively reshape the map of the state, too. The author provides a really detailed breakdown of the travel times, organizing the network around 4 core hubs.
Right, major population centers.
Yeah, Los Angeles Union Station, the San Francisco Bay Area, San Diego, and Sacramento. Let's look at the inner hub times, because this is wild. Los Angeles to the San Francisco Bay Area in 25 to 35 minutes.
Incredible.
Los Angeles to San Diego in 15 to 20 minutes. The Bay Area to Sacramento in 15 to 25 minutes.
You are taking a 6-hour drive up Interstate 5, a drive defined by exhaustion, traffic, and just lost productivity, and compressing it into the duration of a sitcom episode.
But the real societal shift happens outside of those 4 major hubs. The text introduces the concept of feeder cities, which the author brands Aether Towns.
These are the mid-sized cities in the Central Valley and the Inland Empire.
Right. Places like Bakersfield, which has a population over 400,000 and sits about 115 miles from LA. The Aetherlink connects them in 12 to 18 minutes.
That's a game changer for real estate.
Palmdale and Lancaster in the Antelope Valley are an 8 to 12-minute ride to LA, Fresno, which is this massive agricultural hub 160 miles from San Francisco, suddenly becomes an 18 to 25-minute commute to Silicon Valley.
The author is essentially proposing a massive pressure relief valve for the coastal megacities.
Because they're completely out of room.
Exactly. San Francisco and Los Angeles are economically suffocating because they have physically run out of room to grow, and that drives housing costs to catastrophic levels.
Yeah, nobody can afford to live there anymore.
But by turning places like Stockton and Modesto into viable bedroom communities, you open up thousands of square miles of developable land to the coastal workforce.
I look at this the exact same way I look at the historical impact of the elevator.
Oh, that's an interesting analogy.
Think about it. Before the elevator was invented, urban real estate was restricted by human endurance.
Mhm.
A city couldn't grow past 6 stories because nobody would willingly walk up 10 flights of stairs every day.
Right, the top floors were actually the cheapest back then.
Exactly. The elevator removed the physical penalty of height, allowing cities to explode vertically into skyscrapers, which completely reinvented urban economics.
And you're saying the Aetherlink does the same thing.
It does the exact same thing, but horizontally. It removes the time penalty of distance, allowing California to expand horizontally and effectively turning the entire 163,000 square miles of the state into a single, highly unified metropolitan zone.
That horizontal expansion fundamentally alters the concept of real estate value. And the text doesn't just view this as a tool for economic productivity either. It specifically mentions adding tourist or express lines to natural reserves like Yosemite and Lake Tahoe.
I saw that. That's a really fascinating detail.
It is.
It means the system isn't just grinding away for corporate commuting, it radically democratizes access to nature.
Absolutely.
Someone living in a dense, lower-income neighborhood in Los Angeles who might never have the time or a reliable vehicle to drive 7 hours to Yosemite can suddenly access one of the most stunning national parks on Earth in 45 minutes.
It creates a fluidity of experience across all socioeconomic classes.
But that fluidity requires physical anchor points, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
system needs places where the underground velocity interfaces with the surface communities.
The stations.
But the text is very clear that these are not traditional subway stations. The author refers to them as ether ports.
And the description of these ether ports in the source material reads like a blueprint for a high-end arcology.
It really does. The author lists amenities that go way, way beyond transit. They include soundproof, app-booked sleeping pods modeled on Japanese transit hubs.
Perfect for shift workers or people who just need a nap.
Yeah. They feature 247 gyms with VR fitness and physical recovery suites. There are robotic prep gourmet food courts emphasizing produce from integrated vertical farms.
Vertical farms inside a train
You
station.
know, right? Shower facilities, co-working lounges, childcare pods, green atriums, and even holographic art installations.
The sheer density of services suggests the author is really leaning into the sociological concept of the third place.
Okay, unpack that term for us. What is a third place?
Well, in sociology, we have our first place, which is home, and our second place is the workplace.
Okay.
A true third place is a communal environment, like a public library, a local pub, or a park where social fabric is actually woven. It's where you linger, where you run into neighbors.
Right, like a coffee shop. But public transit stations in America today are the exact opposite of a third place. They're like liminal spaces. You want to get in, keep your head down, and get out as quickly as possible.
Usually because they're unpleasant or unsafe.
Yeah. The author's proposing we turn transit hubs into destination spaces where someone might deliberately arrive 2 hours early just to use the VR gym or work from the lounge.
Which is a huge paradigm shift.
But we have to look at the mechanical reality of this. Municipalities currently struggle to keep basic escalators functioning or platforms clean. How does an ether port full of vertical farms and holographic art not immediately degrade into a massive maintenance nightmare?
It's a valid question. The text anticipates that operational reality by detailing the underlying economic engine, which relies on public-private partnerships, or P3s.
So the city isn't running the holographic art exhibits.
Exactly. The author insists these hubs cannot be managed like traditional municipal assets dependent on fluctuating tax budgets. They are envisioned as massive commercial real estate ventures.
Okay, so it's more like a high-end shopping mall that happens to have a Hyperloop in the basement.
Precisely. The transit platform is essentially the anchor tenant in a highly lucrative retail and wellness complex. The private operators are financially incentivized to keep the environment secure, pristine, and technologically upgraded because the Etherport's revenue depends on its status as a premium lifestyle destination.
That makes a lot of sense. And that commercial real estate angle bridges perfectly into the second major pillar of the author's proposal.
The housing.
Yeah. Getting people from Fresno to San Francisco in 20 minutes is an engineering marvel. But if there is no affordable housing in Fresno once they step out of the Etherport, the entire socioeconomic vision collapses.
The commute is useless if you still can't afford a home.
Right. So to solve this, the text pairs the transit system with massive prefab housing developments built by what it calls housing gigafactories.
And this is where the blueprint really transcends infrastructure and becomes a holistic societal rebuild.
Yeah, the author explicitly cites Tesla's playbook here.
Tesla didn't just design a good electric car. They relentlessly optimized the manufacturing process to scale production and lower unit costs.
The machine that builds the machine.
Yes. The text proposes applying those exact, automated, high-volume manufacturing principles to human shelter.
Which is wild. The source material lays out target pricing for these homes that seems utterly impossible in the current California market. $150,000 to $350,000 for an energy-positive family unit utilizing 3D printed components and smart materials.
In California, that price point sounds like a typo.
It really does.
Yeah.
We really need to break down the gigafactory economics section of the text because it provides the mathematical justification for those numbers. It all starts with the initial capital expenditure.
Building the factory itself is a massive hurdle. The text notes that constructing a modern modular housing facility requires anywhere from $40 million to over $100 million in upfront capital.
That's a huge initial risk.
It is. It cites an existing company, Plant Prefab, as a baseline model. You are spending tens of millions on land, specialized robotics, automated assembly lines, and supply chain logistics before a single wall is even built.
So you have to spend a fortune up front.
But the text claims that once the facility is operational, the savings cascade through the entire process, yielding an overall cost reduction of 10 to 30% compared to traditional stick-built homes.
Okay, let's look at the labor shift because that's a big chunk of it. The source notes that labor costs drop by 20 to 30%. Why? Because you are moving 80% of the construction offsite.
Right. Traditional construction relies on highly specialized tradesmen, electricians, plumbers, framers, driving out to a muddy lot, battling weather delays, and essentially custom building a house from scratch.
It's the bespoke tailoring of the housing world. Wait, yes, it is entirely bespoke, which is inherently inefficient.
Every house is a prototype, essentially.
Exactly. The gigafactory model standardizes the process. Factory workers, earning roughly $30 an hour with benefits, according to the text, operate in a climate-controlled environment year-round.
So no rain delays.
No rain delays. An electrician isn't, running wire through a dark, half-built frame in the mud. A robotic arm is feeding wire through a perfectly aligned modular wall panel on a well-lit assembly line.
Furthermore, that assembly line precision drastically reduces material waste.
How much waste are we talking about?
The text calculates a 25 to 40% reduction in scrap.
Wow.
In traditional construction, lumber is shipped to the site, cut to fit by hand, and the offcuts are just thrown in a dumpster. In a gigafactory, bulk materials are precision cut by lasers and algorithms designed to maximize yield. Every scrap is accounted for or recycled.
And then there's the velocity of the build. Factory-built homes are produced 30 to 50% faster. You are cutting the timeline from over a year to a matter of weeks.
Which dramatically reduces the carrying costs of financing for the developers. Time is money, again.
But the author doesn't completely ignore reality here, which I appreciated. The text explicitly acknowledges the risks of this model, pointing to past failures in the modular space. It specifically mentions a company called Katerra.
Katerra is a vital inclusion in the text. They attempted to disrupt the construction industry with massive prefab factories, but they burned through billions and went bankrupt.
So it's not a guaranteed success?
Not at all. The author notes that the theoretical savings of a gigafactory are entirely elusive without a massive, guaranteed, and continuous volume of orders.
You need economies of scale.
Exactly. You cannot run a $100 million automated factory at 20% capacity. The overhead will crush you. The text also highlights the logistical limits of shipping massive home modules down standard highways, as well as the inevitable battles with local zoning boards and NIB why not in my backyard resistance to high-density developments.
That structural vulnerability is exactly why the author inextricably links the housing gigafactories to the Aetherlink transit system. It forms a perfect symbiotic economic loop.
The two halves rely on each other.
Yeah. The factory needs thousands of guaranteed buyers to survive, right? The Aetherlink opens up vast, inexpensive tracts of land in the Central Valley, connecting them to the high-paying jobs on the coast in minutes.
Right.
The Hyperloop physically creates the massive pipeline of demand that the gigafactory requires to stay solvent. And conversely, the Etherports need the dense, affordable housing nearby to justify the cost of the transit stops.
They are the same economic engine. Transit generates the land value. The factories materialize that value into affordable shelter.
Which forces us to confront the financial leviathan of the proposal, the bill. Transforming the physical geography of the world's fifth largest economy is not cheap.
It certainly isn't.
The text details how this gets funded, relying on the legislative framework of the Aetherlink Mobility and Housing Act. Instead of the state managing the construction directly, it opens the project to competitive bids from private consortia.
The author specifically calls out companies with deep expertise in Hyperloop dynamics, advanced tunneling, and aerospace engineering. It references the intellectual descendants of the Boring Company and Virgin Hyperloop.
So the state acts as the regulator and the facilitator, but the private sector executes the hardware.
Right. And the Act mandates bundled integration. A bidding consortium cannot just offer to dig a tunnel. They must partner with real estate developers to deliver the prefab housing megaprojects clustered around the feeder stations.
You can't have one without the other.
Exactly. The legislation also provides the necessary legal tools, streamlining land acquisition via eminent domain specifically for the underground alignments, allowing the tunnel boring machines to bypass the surface-level environmental gridlock we talked about earlier.
Let's break down the author's cost estimates because the numbers reflected the staggering scale of the ambition.
So the numbers are massive.
The text projects a total build-out cost of $120 to $250 billion over a 10 to 15-year phased timeline.
That is $250 billion.
It's unbelievable. The text breaks down the per-mile infrastructure costs, including the tubes, the magnetic propulsion systems, the vacuum pumps, and the heavy seismic engineering required for California's geology, estimating it at $100 to $180 million per mile.
And the etherports.
The massive ether ports are budgeted at $1 to $3 billion each. Phase 1, which the text models as the Los Angeles to Bakersfield spine with critical Bay Area linkages, alone carries a price tag of $30 to $60 billion.
The sticker shock is undeniable. However, the author contextualizes these figures by looping back to the diagnosis of the current high-speed rail.
Right, the $230 billion slow train.
Exactly. The existing surface project, marred by endless delays, is projected to cost up to $230 billion. The author argues that Aetherlink delivers a vastly superior, paradigm-shifting capability for roughly the same lifetime cost as a system that is already technologically obsolete.
But still, to fund this without bankrupting the state treasury, the text relies heavily on value capture mechanisms. This is a crucial economic concept for us to unpack.
It's a key to the whole funding structure.
Yeah. When a government builds infrastructure, it fundamentally alters the value of the surrounding land. If you take a piece of empty dirt in the Antelope Valley that is worth practically nothing, and you build an etherport on it that connects that dirt to downtown Los Angeles in 10 minutes, the value of that land skyrockets instantly.
Traditionally, private developers absorb all of that newly created wealth. Value capture allows the state to recoup its investment by capturing a portion of that geometric appreciation.
So how does that actually work in practice? The mechanism is usually implemented through tax increments.
Right.
The state issues municipal bonds to pay the private consortia building the Hyperloop. Because the new transit hub creates a booming local economy with thousands of new homes built by the gigafactories, new retail, new jobs, the property and sales taxes in that specific zone increase dramatically.
They shoot up.
So the state captures that specific increment of new tax revenue generated strictly by the infrastructure and uses it to pay down the bonds. The project essentially pays for itself by monetizing the geographic wealth it creates, limiting the exposure of the general taxpayer.
It's an elegant financial model, provided the execution matches the theory.
Which is always the big if.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But taking a step back from the granular economics of tax increments and labor rates, the broader context of the source material provides a really fascinating look into the author's mind. The blog, maintained by Paramendra, boasts over 7 million page views and an archive stretching all the way back to 2005.
That's a massive body of work. The sidebar of the blog, which the text includes, lists recent posts and book titles, all published around this single date, June 17th, 2026.
The breadth of topics is staggering.
You have titles focused on logistics, like The Speed Builders, How Humanity Can Deliver Megaprojects in Months, Not Decades, and Physical AWS, How the Logistics Cloud Will Reshape Global Commerce.
And nested alongside those deeply technical treatises are profound philosophical works, notably Kalkiism, the economic and spiritual blueprint for an age of abundance.
And as a quick aside to our listeners, the author does mention various political figures and countries in the blog's sidebars across the political spectrum, but we are entirely neutral on all of that. We're just looking at the overarching systems theory here.
Right, the focus is on the infrastructure and the philosophy.
Exactly. And the author views the physical world as a direct reflection of spiritual and economic philosophies. A 700-mile-per-hour transit system isn't just a way to avoid traffic on the 405 freeway. It is the physical manifestation of Kalkiism, a tool designed to usher humanity out of a mindset of artificial scarcity and into an era of structural abundance.
It demands a rare type of intellect to simultaneously calculate the scrap waste percentage of a robotic lumber saw and envision a statewide socio-spiritual awakening.
It really does. To solve impossible problems, you sometimes need people who think on a trillion-dollar scale. The author perceives technology, urban planning, and human potential as inextricably linked nodes in a massive systemic network.
Well, we've covered immense ground today.
We really have. We started with a state paralyzed by a $200 billion slow train boondoggle, bogged down by century-old property laws and bureaucratic inertia.
And we unpacked the source material's total reset, a network of near-supersonic magnetic pods gliding through vacuum tubes deep beneath the Earth's surface.
We explored Aether ports designed as communal third places, blending transit with vertical farming and wellness. And we unpacked the gigafactory economics required to mass-produce $150,000 homes, effectively merging the sprawling agricultural valleys with the coastal tech hubs.
It is a profound, meticulously detailed vision of a decentralized future. But the core mechanic of the proposal, the assertion that distance dissolves, leaves us with a critical, somewhat unsettling implication regarding human culture.
Oh, I always appreciate a lingering complication. Where does this blueprint break down culturally?
We must consider how distance has historically acted as an incubator for distinct local identities.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, the culture of a rural agricultural community in the Central Valley is fundamentally different from the hyper-accelerated tech culture of Silicon Valley, largely because they are geographically isolated from one another.
Right, they exist in their own bubbles.
Exactly. If you deploy the Aetherlink and instantly remove that isolation, if the software engineer is now living in a prefab home next door to the agricultural worker because the commute is irrelevant, how does that sudden proximity alter the fabric of those communities?
Oh, wow. You are asking if connection inevitably leads to assimilation.
Does bridging the urban-rural divide foster deep empathy and a shared unified California identity? Or does the sheer economic gravity of the coastal hubs simply pave over the distinct local cultures of the Aether Towns?
Do we end up turning 163,000 square miles of diverse geography into one massive homogenized megacity?
Precisely. Infrastructure dictates interaction. When you change how we move, you inevitably change who we become.
That is a brilliant thought to carry forward. So to you listening, the next time you find yourself staring at a sea of red brake lights on the highway, consider what it would mean to measure your life not in miles, but in minutes. Would you trade the distinct character of your isolated town for the undeniable abundance of absolute connectivity? Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today into the mechanics, the economics, and the philosophy of tomorrow's infrastructure.